you think you're through with this stupid encounter, something else comes up. And now Marquisa Hardegui, her mother died. My father had an album because big bazooms were a thing in the 40s and 50s, and my father had the album with Jane Mansfield. She had a record album. It was pink, and she did have big bazooms. And we had mosquito trucks, although I think the truck they hit was a semi or something doing ditches. But we had mosquito trucks that would drive around Jacksonville and spray the smoke because air conditioning was hard to come by. And I believe in 1967 we did not even have window units yet. So Debbie and I went to summer band. We walked there. I told you I was wearing pedal pushers that had been frayed at the knees and probably one of my brother's shirts. But what I've discovered from this diary is 60 years old. My mom got it in 65, 66 when I was about in 5th or 6th grade, hoping that she wanted to be a journalist. And so what I've discovered from this is during that month, we went to Daytona. And so my father split his vacation up that year. It's unbelievable. I know. You think I'm done, there can't be anything else. And I go in here and I say, we ran away. We thumbed a ride, but we ran away. And then in between the couple pages, I say, oh, Vicky's boyfriend, Vicky's Debbie's older sister, not the oldest sister, but the middle sister, gave us a ride to school. I was in Daytona. We swam it. And then in the part that was ripped out, that Debbie said, you got to rip it out. We thumbed a ride and he displayed a gun. We'll get in big trouble when we get in big trouble. I wish I had invited Debbie to come to Daytona with us. I didn't think of it. Now, I had another little friend named Sharon Capel from Lake City, and when her father worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he finally got a preaching job, but it was in Lake City, and it was Capel, Mr. Capel, and Evelyn. You can look it up. They're probably still known there. He formed a church there, and he was a preacher there for a long, long time. Cynthia, Sharon, David, and I'm sorry I don't know the youngest daughter's name, but Sharon and I were pretty good friends. I'd say 8, 9, 10. And for a couple summers, I would go to Lake City and spend a week, and Sharon would come up to Jacksonville and spend a week. And we'd go out to the base and swim at the pool, at the base, and different things, like 4th of July week or something. But, that didn't go very long. I don't guess, but we did it a couple summers. And I got to thinking, if I had not been such an insular, quiet, conforming child, I would have said, Debbie, why don't you come to Daytona with us? She was into the band. She had her flute. She was wearing a peasant top and frayed shorts, probably Wrangler or something. And we went up to the school. And now, in the last few weeks, I've figured something out. Even in 67, when I was pretending to thumb a ride, because she wouldn't. I wanted to go home because we were going on vacation. That's what I had figured out. I was going on vacation. I wanted to get home and start getting ready. I wasn't going to be there from Saturday till the following Sunday. So that's 8 days. And apparently, at some point, I wrote about it in the book. And in this book, even though the page is ripped out, there's one section about 3 lines from the bottom. You can see a TH, curly, 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 a possible B, and then a Y. So I also was able to decipher bright red and talking to, and then like camouflage or something. I might have, in case my mother did pick it up, I talked about thumbing a ride and running away. And I talked about Vicky's boyfriend gave us a ride. And I remember thinking to Debbie, you better ride with your sister next week. You don't want to be out here with this guy. So anyway, this has got to be some kind of proof. I mean, there's got to be. Debbie has written me in an email and said, you shouldn't obsess about something that happened so many years ago, basically, is what she said. She doesn't want her name involved in it. I think that's ridiculous, because I am convinced that this man started formulating some kind of fantasy. Whose red Volkswagen was that? Did he steal it? Did he rent it? You could probably talk to that Diane Edwards woman and ask her exactly how much of a charge did he stick on her credit card that summer. Where was he around June 4th and 5th? Where was he? Come on, people. Another thing is, in Liz's book, she talks about when he was leaving in August to go to Utah, he decided he would use her car to go to Seattle to his summer job. He had a summer job at Department of Emergency Services or something, and he had to go from Tacoma to Seattle or something, I don't know. But he was going to use her car, which he did, and she used his car, and then he allowed her to use his Chevron. Now, she used his Chevron card, as in Chapter 8, that she used his Chevron card a couple times with his Volkswagen. So here's a man who's just murdered 2 people the month before, and he's letting his girlfriend use his car and fill the gas up. It's kind of different. It's kind of odd. It's like a new twist. And that's why, unlike Mr. Fisher, I think he may have flown to Jacksonville and did in that little Virginia Helms girl. I swear to God I do. Because all it would take is that Virginia Vaughn or somebody to fill his tank up a couple times. How did that transpire? Talk to Liz and find out how she could, even though they used a machine like this, how come they just said, well, you're not Theodore, Anyway, I don't know how that transpired. You got to ask her how that transpired. I have no idea. Okay, so I wanted to say about this diary. I looked in it and said, I was in Daytona, and the guy said he loved me and stuff, which was odd too, because I think Mr. Stanos, I don't know, because I'm thinking, Mom, this guy's a creep. I remember in Daytona I got a red shirt with a little yoke collar at Woolworths, because, they would have beach stuff in Woolworths too, because it was a beach town, right? And we saw my uncle at Daytona 500, and there was a chicken on a hot plate, and you put a quarter in, and the hot plate would get so hot the chicken would dance with it. That was cruelty to animals. And I remember that on the boardwalk. What else? I got a little straw fedora hat. And the reason I say this is because in August of '67, I have a picture of that, and I'm with my aunt and 2 aunts and my grandmother, and we're at Mayport. So what I think my father must have split his vacation time into early June, a week in Daytona, and then take some time intermittently in August when his family came to visit. So believe me, people, this is hard to go back. I don't have anybody helping me out. So when I went down with the diary to Kathleen's house, and Debbie happened to be standing there at the corner of the house, she says, no, you can't write it in your diary. Your mom will read your diary, and we'll get in big trouble, because we were hitchhiking. Well, first of all, I don't even think he saw me particularly. He had talked to Debbie on a break time at the school. And why was he at Jeb Stewart? What in God's, can you imagine the infinitesimal, there must have been 160 million people in America. How in the world was he at Jeb Stewart? Years later, I went up to Jeb Stewart and looked at the junior high school yearbooks, which you don't get a junior high school yearbook unless you're a primp or something. And I looked in there looking at the guys, the teachers, saying, well, maybe he was looking for a dad or something, Maybe his dad was a teacher at that school. Because there were a lot of ex-Navy guys that taught him this. Maybe there was a math teacher, kind of looked like, now to think about it, Kilbrew or something. A skinny guy, kind of tall. Wow, I just thought about that. But anyway, it happened. We got in the Volkswagen. I didn't want to. I said, Debbie, we're just pretending. I thought it was on me. But looking back now, she waited on those bleachers because he must have been up near the band shell, and he must have said something like, oh, I'm going to be an English teacher here next fall. I just have to do some paperwork. If I see, and she must have been complaining like her sandals were cutting her feet or something. He must have noticed something and said, oh, I don't know if I can walk. I don't know what her complaint was. I didn't see any of this. I'm extrapolating, but there were break periods, so he might have already said, well, if I see you when I'm leaving, I'll give you a lift or something, like I'll see, when I see you after, whatever. He must have told her something like, I'll give you a lift. And then she stops at the bleachers out of the blue, and I'm wanting to go home because we're getting ready to go to Daytona. And I think, okay, I'll get you, I'll thumb a ride. let me try to thumb a ride. So I went over to the corner and pretended to thumb a ride. That didn't work too well for a couple of times. I felt like a fool out there, and I thought I saw Miss Mock go by. I said, no, I'm not doing it. Miss Wills or Miss Mock is going to go by and I'll get in trouble. So I walked back over, and then this red Volkswagen pops out of nowhere. The guy's not wearing a shirt, and she starts talking to him, and I can't hear what they're saying. And then she said, get in. And I said, no, it's just pretend. We're just pretending. And she said, get in. So I stood there for a second. I said, well, he looked like a preppy guy. He wasn't wearing a shirt, but he did have tan shorts on, like dress shorts, khaki-colored shorts. And it was a bright red Volkswagen. It had what appeared to be a black and white tag, but it was a very bright. And when he went by, I said, hey, naked, because he wasn't wearing a shirt. And then I walked over towards this bright red Volkswagen, which were not common in 1967 Jacksonville, Florida. Guys had muscle cars. They didn't have Volkswagens. And she said, get in. He had a mole on his neck. He was tan. And I got in, and there were books back there. And I said, there's books back here. And he said, just move the books. And I said, and I moved him out of the way. And there was a golf shirt, a polo. It was a light yellow polo with some kind of emblem over one of the breast pocket, over the breasts, a sort of round, not like the polo, you know what I'm saying? It was like an emblem, like a British emblem almost. And then I put it to the side, and then we go around the thing, and I open my clarinet up, and I'm looking at my clarinet case, and then we come to Lamoille, and he turns left, and then at West Gannett, he pulled a revolver. And Debbie quit talking, and I'm sitting there between the two seats, which were Naugahyde black. They were not very tall. They didn't have a headrest. And I look at him in the rearview mirror, and his eyebrows went straight across his face, and he's red, but almost a tan, and I smelled this odor. It smelled like stale clothes, like the clothes have been set in a pile that have a sort of a stink of urine and poo on them. You know what I'm saying? Like if you ever have a dirty clothes pile, kind of like that, where, and the silver revolver. And I said, what is your name? And he said, Theodore. And I said, well, what is your last name? And he said, Bundy. And I said, your gun is silver like Debbie's flute, and your name is Bundy like my clarinet, which I had just learned the name of it. I said, your name is Bundy like my clarinet. Debbie's father's an admiral at NASA. You ought to meet Vicky and Jeannie. They're so pretty and already out on their own. If you're looking for girls, you can go up to the high school, and then, I don't know what all, but something broke the ice, and also the traffic was probably backed up, and he had to turn right, so there's a stick shift. So I don't know where the gun went, but he took us down West Gannett, across Blanding to the old Texaco station that was red brick at the time, and he parked along the sidewalk, which again, I thought, this is weird, because he didn't park in the parking plat, he parked on the sidewalk, and I'm thinking there was a 7-Eleven, and the guy, I can't think of his name right now, Gary, the older guy, he worked for that 7-Eleven. He used to work for Hess Station. I should know his name. Shoot. But he was like in his 30s, and I thought, if worse come to worse, we can run over there. And then Debbie started talking again, leaning in. The door was open, and I kept thinking, please lower that latch again. I got to get, I want to get out of here. And then somebody scoffed at me. I said, I think I stood up in that Volkswagen because I was small enough at like 4'2" or 4'5" or whatever. I was able to hunch over, and that way I could step out and not have to scoot out. You see what I'm saying? I wanted to get out that bad. I almost felt like kissing the ground when we got out of there. And she said a few things, and the last thing we saw was he turned on the Harlow, and he was going down towards town on Blanding. Now, that's a fact. I want to know, there's a lot of stuff I want to know, and I filled a lot of pieces in over the years, and it's not fair to me, and I could die at any time. As a matter of fact, I had a kidney sickness, a kidney or bladder or pancreas, who knows. I wanted to go on my vacation, so I went. But anyway, I get some blood work this week anyway. All right, that's where we're at. Thank you.